Hey Marty, welcome to the show.
Hello, great to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. I'm really bummed out that I didn't get to meet you in person at Connections. We kind of missed each other, but just for for the occasion, I am
Oh,
wearing.
yes, nice shirt. Yes,
Thank you.
connection.
For
He's wearing
those,
a connection shirt.
yes, exactly. So for those who are only listening, not watching on YouTube, I'm wearing a Connection hoodie because it's a great new line of swag
Mhm.
that came out there. Um, but today's not about connections. Today is all about Martin. And Marty, if I look back at your career, starting from your early days in advertising to becoming SVP of Strategy at Salesforce, I'd be curious to learn about the key moments or decisions that significantly shaped your career path. Could you share that with me and the audience?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a random career, at least that's what my mother thinks. But I started out, I wanted to be an actor, actually. So I was a theater major. And then I came across the realization early on that I had no talent. And acting is actually a lot harder than it looks. People out there, it's like golf. It looks so easy on television, but it's actually really hard. So at any rate, that didn't work out, and I tried stand-up comedy, but I wanted to be a writer basically. So I was trying to, get some background for being a writer, and I was actually a professional writer. I was a magazine writer in New York for in the '90s. I wrote for New York Magazine, Forbes. I wrote for GQ, and I ended up at MTV writing for a television program that was well known in 1999. Pop-up video, it was called, and it was basically there were bubbles on top of music videos with information. And then I was doing that one day, and I thought, I'll never be able to afford an apartment as a writer in New York. So I went to business school, and that was the reason, more or less, to be quite honest. But it turned out when I liked business school, I enjoyed it, and I graduated and I became a management consultant. And what I ended up doing as a management consultant was PowerPoint decks. It's basically information on a slide, and then I was presenting it. It was very similar to working in pop-up video, very similar to trying to be a stand-up comedian. So I think it's related, in a way, it's storytelling. And then I realized as a management consultant that wasn't really a good fit. I wrote a book about that, and then I ended up in the ad business, and that was much better. I was at Digitas, I was in digital advertising, I was doing measurement, and that was actually a really good fit because it was a combination of the creative side and the analytical side, which I have left brain, right brain. And then I ended up I was recruited into Gartner, and I ended up at Salesforce. It's all linear in a way. I've had probably only 4 jobs since business school, but each one was a little better. And then this job at Salesforce, very interesting. I get to present, I get to speak, I get to explain things, but there's an analytical component as well because it's a software company. So
That's amazing. You've been through so many different pathways in your career, but it's interesting
yeah.
to see how they all come together now. And I can imagine that all of those skills at different phases in your life are to some extent useful now.
Well, the one I'm a little embarrassed about the stand-up comedy career because I never really got out of the open mic phase, just a little above.
Mhm.
But the good thing about that experience, and I recommend it to people, try it, or do improv or something, because now when I present at a corporate event, uh, no one will ever throw anything at me. No one will scream and leave the room. It'll never be as bad as my worst show as a comedian, so I don't get nervous. It's actually very easy to do a corporate presentation. People are polite and well behaved, and so that it's good training.
Absolutely.
You know.
And what you said about that book that you wrote, I think is interesting. I was reminded by Bobby Jana, your CMO for Marketing Cloud, or the CMO for Marketing Cloud, that you wrote this pretty notorious book, I think, back in the day, and it was
Yeah.
kind of interesting. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I was a management consultant in New York, not in the media business. I wanted to be in the media business, but this was right after like 2001. There was a big recession, like the market crashed. The Nasdaq had gone up 5x during the dot-com boom, and it crashed. So it was not a good time in business. So I ended up mostly consulting in the consumer healthcare space,
Mm.
and I didn't like consulting. I thought that people were phony. I felt they were trying to sound intelligent, but they weren't. And I had a bad attitude, essentially. So I wrote a book about it called House of Lies. And it was supposed to be a dictionary. It was like consulting to English dictionary. Because I'm like, I'm going to tell you how if you're listening to your consultant, this is what they're really saying. Because they try to sound smart. They say, leverage going forward and, pushback and all this stuff. And but they're not English words. They're words that consultants use to sound smart. So anyway, then it became a memoir, and then it came out, and consultants hated it, and but I was quitting anyway, so I didn't care. But everyone was mad at me, and they thought I was an evil man. And then some years later, it was actually turned into a television program on Showtime, starring Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle plays a character. It's called House of Lies. Plays a character in Marty Khan, who's based on me, Marty Khin. That's my name, Marty Khan. And when that show came out, all of a sudden consultants loved me. And I was like the most popular guy around. And they wanted me to go back to the reunion. And they forgot completely about how mean they were when the book came out. So I'm like, that's very interesting. If you're associated with Hollywood and show business, people love you. But if you're associated with like truth telling and satire and the written word, people don't. So I learned something.
It's a somewhat sad and cynical reflection of society as a whole, but I do
So
to some
true.
extent.
They're superficial. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it can be, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, social media doesn't always play well out there either.
Yeah.
Um, I've definitely seen that play out too in the consulting space, where there can be some pretense and
Yeah.
pretending you know it all, which you don't always do. And I can say this as a former consultant. Now, having said that, I do have respect for certain consultants a lot. I do think they can be good central storages of knowledge because they have that unique opportunity to have exposure to certain problems more often than other people. But yes, there can be quite a bit of pretense in all
Well, no, I mean, in reality, there's some very smart consultants and some who are experts and actually probably better than most practitioners. But I was doing a satire, so it's kind of skewed the other way.
of course.
It's comedy, it's
That makes sense. Yeah, yes, you can always pull the comedy card there, I guess.
I guess so, yeah.
um, you are also active on social media. I've been following you for quite a while, actually. And
Oh,
something I
thank you.
remember seeing was a post about Taylor Swift. I think this has been a while ago, might have been a year, even 2 years.
Mm.
So I wanted to ask you, do you still consider Taylor Swift a master marketer, and are you a Swiftie?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been accused of putting Taylor Swift into every one of my presentations every year, and it's true, unfortunately. I really should move on. But I started when I was a Gartner. So I joined Salesforce almost 5.5 years ago, we'll say. So 2018, 2017, I think. I was looking at Taylor Swift as a brand. I'm like, how is she so popular to so many different types of people? How is this possible? Because she was, universally beloved by all people on the left, people on the right, people in the north, people in the south, and in Europe. And so I did some research into her. And basically, the short story about that is that she herself, nobody really knows her, at least at that time. She was a blank space. We were projecting
Mhm.
ourselves onto her, so people saw in her basically more about themselves. So then I thought, well, that's really genius brand marketing, because if you can be the kind of brand that has the definition sort of, but is flexible enough that people can see themselves in you, then you have a much bigger audience. You can have like a mass audience because people are ultimately quite selfish. So that's what she does very well. And I thought that was it's just genius. And she's even bigger now. She's exploded since then. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
She's extremely popular. What I think is interesting, though, that she managed to essentially be this kind of mirror. That's what you're saying, right?
yeah,
She's reflecting what other people project on her.
yeah.
Whereas so much in branding and marketing is effective because it's not that, but because it's polarizing. A lot of things are
Mm.
very effective because you take a stance, because you're opinionated, and you know you're gonna uh, lose out on some audience because of that, but the rest of the audience can be more engaged because of it.
No,
And
I
it
mean it's a
seems
good point.
you're,
Yeah, because she's a mass brand. Like she's trying to get
yeah.
everybody. Not every brand is that way. In fact, that's not a smart way to be because it takes an enormous amount of effort and time to do that. And investment, frankly. But if you're like Patagonia, for instance, has staked out a claim to eco-friendly, they're going to alienate people who are anti-green, and there are people out there. That's okay. They're like, I'm going to give up on those people, but I'm going to really super serve the other audience, and that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
What would you say is it that someone like Taylor Swift then does to avoid having to polarize people and still manage to get to capture so many fans?
Well, it's the last year has been a little different because she's made hints politically. She's sort of to the left, which I value, but but she has alienated some people on the right in the US, particularly because we're so polarized. And the other thing is the whole football thing. So I mean, that hasn't
Mhm.
hurt her career. I think now we know she's a football fan, big deal. So, but she just never took a stand on anything historically. We didn't know her opinion about anything, to be honest, until very recently. And she still doesn't really. She kind of hints. She's like, get out and vote. And you have to read between the lines. You're like, oh, maybe she's liberal. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. But that's what she does. Doesn't take a stand.
All right, gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, beyond moving on beyond Taylor, can you tell us a bit more about a recent project or initiative at Salesforce that you're particularly proud of and why it stands out to you?
When I started it was 2018, they hired me. I was hired by Bob Stutson to Marketing Cloud in the product team. Like it was a role called product strategy, which doesn't exist and didn't exist, just me. But he hired me in and it was like, well, I was a Gartner. I was looking at marketing clouds and I started to cover this area called customer data platforms, which was new. People talked about it a lot. There wasn't a lot of adoption at the time, but a lot of hype, like an enormous amount. So the question at Salesforce was, do we have a CDP? Do we need to acquire one? Do we need to partner? What is going on here, basically in the marketing space? So I did part of that analysis in the beginning, and my thesis right away was, no, we need to at least either acquire or build CDP because we don't have it at Salesforce. We have CRM. It's net new.
Mhm.
And so that was, 5.5, 6 years ago. There wasn't an acquisition that made sense because, as you may know, acquiring company and trying to bolt it on can be more work than just building it from scratch and
Yes.
more difficult, depending on the technology. So Brett Taylor, co-CEO at the time, decided, the CDP is so central to the enterprise. It's like customer data that we need to build it on the Salesforce platform, on CRM, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Data Cloud, what's now Data Cloud. And that was a brilliant decision, but it made it take longer. Everyone's like, why is Salesforce so late to the CDP market? Well, the reason is because we were actually building a CDP. We had a head start because we had the platform, metadata, and all that. But it took time, and now it's 3.5 years out, and Data Cloud is huge. I mean, it's a big product. I tried to do some research into, is this the fastest growing software product ever, taking it on its own? And the
Mhm.
answer I got was yes, it is, but I can't really prove it. So I don't make that claim, but I hint that that's the truth. And I mean the fastest growing software product to, 200 million, 300 and beyond.
Well, that's of course also because you guys already have such a tremendous portfolio of customers, and I
Yeah,
think
we had
something.
advantages. Yeah, we're not a startup. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I also think that something similar happened with Marketing Cloud, maybe, because I
Mhm.
still believe Marketing Cloud has been your most successful acquisition in terms of return on investment.
Yeah, probably.
Um, yeah. Um,
Yeah, I mean, Marketing Cloud, it was, I talked to a guy who was at Epsilon competitor at the time of Marketing Cloud, say to
mm,
email. And the guy was like, well, we thought of Exact Target, which was the acquisition, as a, pretty good competitor, but definitely not, number one in the field. But once Salesforce acquired it, it got into the jet stream of the sales channels. It just took off. And so there's a real advantage to being part of the Salesforce kind of sales machine. And I
mm,
know up on the inside, it's a machine. I mean, they are very disciplined. So, that helped.
absolutely.
And then the product got better and so on. Yeah.
I'd be curious to learn if you still think Data Cloud to be a CDP, and I'll justify that question. So I remember initially when you guys surveyed your customers about what CDPs are you using, they answered, "Oh, we're using you," whereas you
Yeah.
guys didn't even have a CDP, as you point out yourself. It was a CRM, so clearly there was a lot of confusion in the market about what a CDP should be. And I know went back to an initial white paper, I think back in 2016. There was also a major fast-moving consumer goods company out there that sent out an RFP for that triggered a lot of stuff. Um, but you guys did start building it. But over time, the name has changed a lot,
Yeah.
which has, let's be honest, a bit of a mixed response in the ecosystem. But today
Yeah.
it's called Data Cloud. And it almost seems that it does more than what a CDP does. That's what some people have suggested. So I'm kind of curious, especially given your role, especially given your history, what's your take on that? And how do you think about Data Cloud? Is it a CDP? Is it something else? Is it more than a CDP?
I mean, it's hard to say. An analogy would be CRM, the CRM space. So that's customer relationship management. It appeared in like the 90s, and Gartner in particular was a champion of CRM. And then CRM became CRM for sales, CRM for service, CRM for field service, CRM for, I don't know, medical devices in China, whatever. There's probably 300 or 400 different many categories of CRM. And so Gartner doesn't even have a magic quadrant for customer relationship management. It's too many different things. I thought from the beginning CDP would be the same. It's customer data. It's so core to the enterprise that it's going to be adapted to whatever the enterprise is. So it's not it has certain characteristics, and the CDP Institute has done a nice job of defining what those are. But even those characteristics are changing. But one of them, for instance, from the beginning, David Robb, he actually invented the CDP category. It wasn't me. Someone asked me if I did. It was David Robb, 2013. But he said one of the main, requirements of a CDP is that it has its own database. That is, you ingest data into it and it stores data. But now he's saying, well, actually, there are things he might call a CDP that don't do that. The so-called composable CDP, where the
Right.
database is the data cloud, might be Snowflake or whatever. But is that a CDP or is it not? It might do all the other things, but the data sitting in the cloud, it seems to me it probably is a CDP, but it doesn't fit the definition of a CDP. So to answer your question, my roundabout way is saying I would say data cloud is not a CDP. It would answer a CDP RFP, but it does more, and its ambition is to do more. And the most important part of that is that it serves the entire customer experience from end to end, from acquisition through loyalty, through commerce, through service, through sales, and marketing, by the way, and marketing, but not just marketing. So it's more ambitious, Data Cloud.
Absolutely. And naturally, we are very interested in the marketing piece, seeing
Yeah.
what's going to happen with Marketing Cloud growth. For us, it's very interesting because it opens a whole array of possibilities as a software vendor too. But maybe before we go there, you've mentioned Gartner a few times in passing now, and obviously you know it was a big part of your career too. Um, you guys have recently been named a leader, the leader actually in on the quadrant for a CDP. So congratulations, first off. And secondly, I wanted to ask, like, how important is that relationship with Gartner, and what effect does it have on the market from your point of view?
Well, this evaluation was particularly important, and I think it was important because it was the first major analyst firm that had done an evaluation, like a detailed, careful evaluation of the CDP market. And it included actually all of the companies that we would consider major competitors in the CDP space. Adobe, Segment, Telium. There were a number of them, almost 20. So this was the first evaluation. We took it very seriously. And in fact, if you saw the questionnaire and the requirements, it was a lot of work. They asked for
I'm
10
sure.
customer references. All of these vendors had to come up with 10 people who would talk to an analyst. And the questionnaire itself was voluminous. So it was more work than the typical Magic Quadrant. We were hopeful. I thought we'd be a leader for sure. We did really well, and I think that's just a testament to. A lot of it is the vision, like how we articulated where we're going, and it's related to the customer experience end-to-end CX. But we came out highest on both axes. It was and in terms of the response to the market, it's been very helpful. There were a lot of RFPs in the past where we were up against another CDP who was making claims that may or may not have been true, and we're making different claims that are, of course, all true. But the buyer would have a hard time assessing, who's telling the truth. So they want to do a POC, and this just helps. We can say, well, look, here's an independent source that validates some of our claims. So
Um, so super interesting, and also given your role, given your history and the different positions you've had to look at the market, I'll be interested as
yeah.
a software partner to Salesforce. Where do you think could be the opportunity? And maybe if it's too good of an opportunity, you can tell me after the interview, after the recording, so other people won't hear it. But
You're the only one. Yeah, well,
yeah,
I mean, as a partner, um, there are things that Salesforce doesn't do this isn't helpful to you maybe, but like for instance, we don't sell data. People are surprised to hear that. We actually don't sell data. And then we don't sell media. But these are things that users of Data Cloud want to do. They want to, do ad campaigns, and they want to, append data onto their customer records and their account records. So we have successful partners in those areas. Media partners, we're a major source of demand for some of the so-called walled gardens. And that's the way you can activate first-party data in an advertising context. So you send it over to Facebook and Instagram and Google and Amazon, and those guys are working with us very closely, and we have good connections with them. We send them a lot of business basically, and so they're very good partners on the ad side. And then on the data side, we have Dentsu, we have Axiom, and the the usual suspects. But we have co-customers with them a lot. So there's that area, and then there are other areas like the emerging AI space. We want to support AI. We have AI features, but I think that most of the user data cloud can think of it as a source of data, a repository of data, and you can apply all kinds of stuff to that data. And one of it might be verticalized AI models. And so I think there's an ecosystem of partners that are arising in that area to use the data in data cloud and kind of extend it in different ways.
Yeah.
And then, of
Yeah,
course,
makes
on
sense.
the SI, the partnership side, we're not really a services firm. We have some services just to help the products, but we are very supportive of, and you see most of the sponsors of connections were actually firm, services firms, SIs and agencies. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense.
McKinsey was a big sponsor of the CMO event. So I take back everything I said about consultants earlier. It doesn't apply to them, of
Of
course.
course, naturally. I think
Yeah,
that was a given.
as our valued sponsor. Yeah. But I mean, they
Cool.
recognize, CDP is not, it's not all about marketing. It's about the enterprise, and it's a major kind of C-suite decision, and it would involve a lot of kind of high level thinking and strategy. And so I think everyone recognizes that.
Absolutely. And if you take a step back and look at the MarTech ecosystem as a whole, just recently the latest MarTech landscape publication was done. It just keeps baffling my
Oh yeah.
mind how many more solutions there are, how many more vendors there are, and sure
Yeah.
there is some consolidation, but there's also still more proliferation. So how do you think it will evolve over the next 5 years? And of course, what role do you envision Salesforce playing in shaping that future?
I mean, there won't be uh, there'll be acquisitions, because acquisitions, I always think of that when a big strategic acquirer, and Salesforce has done this, not so much recently, but it's almost like there's R&D done in the market, and so these kind of scrappy startup will appear doing something, and it will succeed, and so then it gets the notice of a big strategic acquirer, and so they'll acquire it and bring it on. So they're bringing on the talent, the technology. So in a way, it's been market tested. So that there's that kind of acquisition, and that will always happen. There'll always be people with good ideas that will get acquired, but I don't think that will lead to any consolidation. There'll always be more and more and more and more, and more logos. And the
Yeah.
reason is simple. Scott Brinker said it. He's like, who complains about, too much choice in the iTunes store, in the App Store? Nobody. I mean, you may not like most of it, but you're not going to complain that you have too much choice. Oh, it's overwhelming. Maybe somebody would, but that's not how it works. You basically want more is more because you have more choice. And with Salesforce's role, I mean, I think that the acquisitions that Salesforce makes over the years have become bigger.
Mhm.
So, and there are below the radar. There are smaller ones, particularly in the analytics and the AI space. There've been a bunch of little ones, but or plugins, like there'll be companies that'll be on the App Exchange that kind of reach critical mass, and we realize it would actually could fold in nicely because it already works with a lot of co-customers. But they're the big ones, and these are kind of big strategic investments like MuleSoft and Tableau and Slack, which was enormous, 24 or $25 billion at the time. And so I think going forward, Salesforce role will be to make some of those, not very many, very carefully. What they'll be, I don't know. They didn't tell me. And then these other ones folding in, but I think that probably the path to success with Salesforce is to have joint customers and to have customers who are using us together. And so that's when the acquisitions make the most sense.
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. There needs to be some prerogative and needs to be some track record and history and just good collaboration, I would
Yeah,
assume.
and proof that it works together. It's like, well,
Mhm.
velocity is a good example. That was like a verticalization of Salesforce. It was
Mhm.
built on Salesforce basically, and so it made a lot of sense. We would acquire velocity. So now we could have industry clouds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So going from the MarTech landscape as a whole, let's zoom in again on Marketing Cloud specifically. What would you say are Salesforce's goals? What can you share in terms of goals for Marketing Cloud specifically in the next few years, and how might they transform customer interactions?
Well, I think Marketing Cloud is, it's a successful product. It's a growing product. I think that it's from the inside of Salesforce, our goal, particularly since I joined, I don't give myself credit for this. I think the vision, has been there. But actually, Steve Fisher, he's our kind of product strategist. He's a friend of Mark Benioff, so he was hired probably 3 years ago or so. He worked at eBay. He was retired, and Mark kind of brought him in out of retirement. Brilliant man, and he's a strategic thinker. But his point was, we need to make everything. We need to take all of these applications and break them down into services and build them all on the same platform. So basically that's a big effort. Behind the scenes, we are in the process of kind of decomposing the applications, including Exact Target and into its components, and then putting them on Salesforce platform, which is, Hyperforce, and then Data Cloud now is the data layer, and then the analytics services, and you have it like flow services on top of that. And the reason to do that is just so that the clouds, which will always exist, work better together. So that you can do things in the same way through the same UI in marketing and service. So then your marketing service teams basically can serve the customer in a way that's kind of invisible to the customer. That's the goal. So I think ultimately, it's a year, we're on a journey year by year. You saw Marketing Cloud Growth Edition, which was kind of a mini version of Marketing Cloud, which was built on our platform that used Flow instead of Journey Builder. So that is a taste of, where we're going, I think, in the long run. The
Yep.
customer shouldn't notice it. They should just notice it works better. But behind the scenes, things will be changing.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah,
think it's a really exciting change and it'll be helpful. And as I mentioned, we
yeah,
also consider it as I mentioned before in other places, we consider Marketing Cloud Growth like super interesting because
yeah,
it presented itself with a new opportunity for us to, um, in the shorter term, even because it does address more SMB and B2B needs. That's how it's positioned.
yeah.
But in the longer term, beyond that, I think as well. Um,
Well, we
awesome.
also wanted to, because there's companies out there with product-led growth. Think of HubSpot. So you can
Yeah.
sign up for HubSpot as a relatively small business, and it's easy. And then you grow with them. So then when you become big, if you become big, then you're still a HubSpot customer. So we wanted to make that. It wasn't so easy with Salesforce. We were expensive. We were large. You had to call the salesperson. Couldn't use your credit card. So we wanted to make it easy to have an entry and then grow. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. And we're also huge fans of PLG, product-led growth. So for those who
yeah,
don't know what that is, it's usually something like a freemium model where people get to try your product for free for a while or indefinitely, but at a limited usage. And then basically you get hooked and you start using the product more and more until
yeah,
you take out a credit card or whatever. And so we kind of have done that always because we have made this free plugin called DESelect Search for the Marketing Cloud that adds a search bar to it. Um, Although I would typically think more of it as a lead magnet, but it's been a tremendous lead magnet for us. But we've actually also started to create a free version of our segmentation solution for the Marketing Cloud, DESelect segment, so people can now install it for free and work with it. And it's interesting. It does take a lot more work and discipline, I would say, than as a SaaS company initially think of, because there are no services, there is no support, there's no training. Like the product needs to be like super self-explanatory and the
yeah.
learning portals and whatever needs to be really there. So there's definitely been a journey for us to appreciate that.
That's a good point. You can't do hand holding. It's too expensive. So it has to
Exactly,
be intuitive. Yeah.
exactly. There's also a growing emphasis, excuse me, on zero-party data in gaining traction. How is Salesforce equipping marketers to effectively collect and utilize zero-party data within Data Cloud and Marketing Cloud?
Yeah, I mean zero party and first party. I mean first party CRM is mostly all first party data, so it's not new to Salesforce.
Mhm.
Zero party would be, you're trying to collect it from customers actively. I think that in the past 4 years, there's been a lot more interest in that. It's been there's been a sense of urgency that kind of at times felt like panic, that customers didn't have enough first party data, and particularly in the consumer product area where traditionally they don't have direct relationships with customers. And these are big companies, and a lot of them were quite concerned, and they were concerned about the regulatory. And our answer to all of that is it will be different for every company. Some, in every case going forward, without third party cookies, someone will have to have first party data. It's either you, or you can use like a retail network, or you can use the walled gardens, or so there. But someone out there, and you see so many now the retail media networks appearing, which are basically companies like Uber that have, or Marriott that have first party data, and they're just making it available, for advertising. You can rent it essentially to do
Mhm.
targeting. But zero party data is important, and I think that we made the acquisition of Evergage a few years ago, which is a personalization platform. And what it does is, in the session, it will make the experience more relevant, and ultimately it's trying to get people to engage with the website, with the app. That's what it does. It's personalization platform, and a lot of that is about trying to get them to give them enough value that they give you an email or some kind of first party data, so that you can build a relationship with them and a profile.
Mhm.
And that was very popular. It's been a very successful product for us. Personalization. It's getting closer and closer to Data Cloud because they're related. The data that's collected in the personalization needs to reside, we hope, in Data Cloud ultimately. And so you can, it gives you a more complete picture. Because I think that early in the journey, you don't know somebody, so you're using a first party cookie or nothing, and you're just trying to personalize based on behavior in that session. And then as you get their email and you get a deeper relationship, you get a better profile of them over time. And that deeper profile is something that should reside in Data Cloud ultimately.
I've also seen it firsthand at some larger implementation projects where the prevailing IT and marketing leaders had the initial inclination to use sort of legacy data from older ERP systems to do their marketing campaigns for their brand new marketing automation platform of choice. The customer I'm thinking about right now was using, at the time, still named Pardot, now Marketing Cloud Account Engagement. Um, and from what I've seen, that just doesn't work because all of the data is super outdated. There might be a massive disconnect between the people who generate those lists and the marketing teams. So you really want to get this sort of actual constantly updated stream of data of
Mhm.
based on how customers really engage with your brand to drive your marketing from what I can tell.
It's true. I mean, there are some characteristics that don't change much over time, but not very many. I mean, I'm a male, so I guess I'd be buying men's clothing, so that won't change. But on the other hand, the most important determinants of purchase are things that are in the moment. A lot of it is how much time do I have to decide? So that kind of stress factor. What do I need right then? Like, what am I actually literally looking for? Am I looking for a credit card or a home loan? And you wouldn't know that unless you're observing me, in that session,
Mhm.
or you learned it somehow. But that's the most important information. And then the other stuff that kind of doesn't decay over time is less important. It's also most likely to be known by your competitors, so it's less differentiated as well.
That's a good point on the competitive side. So it's almost
Yeah,
as if the ability to capture real-time engagement and buyer intention, whether it's in B2C or B2B, is super important. I also see it in my
yeah.
business, after all, right? So finding out what could be the ideal customer in ICP is really important, especially for our own outbound strategy, which we do have. But being able to surface buyer signals, even anything beyond the obvious, hey, give me a demo, is also really important to get to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, there's even data about where someone is having an impact on their purchase. Like, are they outside or in the office? They're different kind of mindsets. So
Mhm.
there's all sorts of information that you could, if you have it, you can do much better marketing. But
Absolutely.
you have to collect it. Telemetry.
You have to collect it for sure. And there's another important term with zero in it that I want to address because it's a more recent announcement from Salesforce and it has to do with
Zero
uh, uh,
copy.
exactly zero copy data
Yeah.
storage. So, which is not to be confused with the thing we've just discussed. So,
Well,
can you please elaborate on what it means and explain it to our audience?
it's highly related to Snowflake in particular because they developed technology a number of years ago. People underestimated it actually, but it's an ability to it's very advanced technology, but now it's widely used. But basically, it's the ability to have data, two data stores. You can have more than two, but as an example, two, you have data cloud and then you have data in Snowflake. And you can literally access the data in data cloud or the data in Snowflake either way without moving it. So when I say access it, that means you know what's there. You have visibility into it. And if you do a query, you can use the data that's sitting in this other database, but you're not lifting it and shifting it into the new environment, which saves a lot of time and effort and money, computational costs and all that. So it's very useful. And it also helps in terms of data discipline. There's information that you'd want to reside in the cloud, all your product data, maybe your transaction data in Snowflake or in Databricks or BigQuery. And then in Data Cloud, you have other information about customers, but maybe not all your product information. But you'd want to know some of the product information if you make recommendations about products. So it's relevant, but you don't want it all. So it's a way to kind of connect, and it's just going to get more and more relevant, more and more prevalent to the point where maybe in the future there won't be any databases. It'll all be this kind of virtualized environment where data is sitting in hundreds and thousands of different places, but it's all available centrally.
Who
That's
knows for,
that's the distant future. Yeah.
yeah, where you just have an application layer that taps into these data lakes using zero copy.
Yeah.
In that sense, it will be kind of funny if, for some customers, not for all, if for some customers, Data Cloud gets to be used as a composable CDP because it could be possible
It could be,
technically, I
yeah.
figure.
Yeah, when we compete with composable CDPs and they say frankly untrue things about us. There was one recently that said we make copies. It's not zero copy, which is not true. It is zero copy. It's also zero ETL. But I mean, you can make a copy. Then sometimes there's an advantage to making a copy. So, but you can use Data Cloud. I mean, we don't describe it as composable CDP, but you can do composable use cases. Like you can have data sitting in your data warehouse and still use the segmentation in the Data Cloud. So that's sort of composable.
Very interesting. Would you, is there an example that you have in mind when you say that there could be advantages to storing or not storing the data? I think I could just make it a little bit more concrete for the people who are listening.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, like for instance, in Snowflake is and I keep using them as an example, but it could be Databricks, it could be BigQuery.
Yeah.
You could have all of your transactional data, like every single transaction that's made in all of your stores and all of your all of your online areas, and some of it is connected to an individual, maybe through a loyalty program. So there's a person label on it. Some of it isn't, but you wouldn't necessarily want all of that to be copied and transported into Data Cloud. If you're a big retailer, you might have millions and millions of records, even billions in a couple of months. And does that belong in Data Cloud? It's still relevant because I want to do a recommendation or even segmentation based on the products someone has bought, in the past, or even trends in their product purchase. So that might be relevant to I put them in this segment, or I want to make a product recommendation based on purchases they made recently. And I want it to be exhaustive. I want it to include all the stuff that they did offline. I want stuff that's done online. So I want access to the purchase data, but it doesn't make sense for me personally to store it all in Data Cloud. So this zero copy is a way to make that happen, to make that feasible in a way. And in the past, it would have been, but transporting, there's a lot of costs involved. As people will know in IT, people in marketing don't realize this, but there's a lot of expense involved in anything where you transform data, computational expense, or store data. There's a storage expense, believe it or not. And then moving data is both storage and a computational expense. So and also you introduce risk. There's always mistakes that happen, things that aren't copied right, or there's errors that are introduced. And then there's also a time lag. It doesn't happen instantly. So then you have a later copy of the data sitting over here, doesn't sync. So
Mm.
there's issues with copying always. Um,
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you elaborating on that example. Makes it a little bit more concrete, I think, for people who are not as familiar with these technologies yet. Um, we're getting close to having to round up this really interesting conversation. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, what advice would you give to aspiring MarTech leaders who want to make a significant impact in the industry? Any specific skills, maybe a mindset, concepts, frameworks that you think are really crucial these days?
I mean, I always think that in conversations I have with people who are, like myself, farther along their career, looking back, and I think it's good to have technical knowledge. Now, you don't need to have a PhD or be a master's or anything like that, but it is like if you're in an analytical area, take a class in Python and actually do coding or SQL, or even though you think computers will be doing it, it's not important. The whole exercise of learning how to do this, to think how to do it, to be structured, will really help. And I found like I did a SQL boot camp. I didn't know any SQL, and I did that. I don't do it. I don't use it in my job, but I can ask more intelligent questions. I can understand things more concretely, and it's all because I kind of know how that works in a way. I'm not an expert. No one would hire me to write SQL for them, but on the other hand, I don't know nothing. So I think that's always very helpful. Anything actually, especially with AI now, get to figure out how it works. I mean, it's not that hard.
I I actually love that answer because I studied psychology and then went into consulting. Whoops, kidding. Along the way, I taught myself how to code, and
Yeah,
it indirectly led me to the founding of my company. Because if I hadn't understood the technologies that I taught myself how to use, I would never have been able to come up with the idea. And
yeah,
today I don't code at all, but it's been a while since I did. But I did at the start. But again, if I hadn't learned the technical skills, I wouldn't have been able to see the solution, even though I am more
yeah.
on the quote unquote business side. So I love that answer. Um, Marty, it's been such a pleasure, such an interesting conversation. Where can people connect with you? Where can they follow you and find you?
Well, you can reach me at Salesforce, mkin at Salesforce, Kihn. I have a website, martinkhin.com. And
All right,
yeah, LinkedIn. Happy to help,
that's great. Well,
especially if
make
you want to
sure
talk about Data Cloud. Yeah.
absolutely. We'll make sure to add those handles in the description too of the interview. And yeah, once again, thank you so much for being on the show, and hope to see you in the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Anthony.